Welcome to the King's Court. I'm your host, King Roberto. Joining you from the King's Lair today for this episode 6 of the King's Court podcast. The Court of Competition is the title today. We're going to go out and leave the family affair behind for the barbecues and campfires. And we're going to go out and look at the competitive nature of the King's Court and all of its subjects that are in the King's Court. Now, I'll be the first person to tell you that I'm a competitive person. There's a poster board that's in my house hanging on the wall that says I have an addiction, and it's called winning. And that is me to a T. I admit it freely, openly. I like to win. I like to compete. I like to play the games, whatever the game might be. I'm your guy. If you want a partner, I can't say that I'll be the best partner, but I'm willing to play and I'm willing to do the work that it takes to try to compete and win. You know, the court isn't just about stories and tables. Sometimes it is an arena. And today, we're talking about that arena. Competition builds character, or at least good stories. There's something that's built inside everybody who competes. And for me, it started when I was very young. I was 9 years old when I really started figuring out what it meant to compete with somebody. And this was through the 4-H program and raising livestock. I was raising sheep and lambs. And that took me through my childhood years of raising the sheep, because I developed what started out as just a market lamb for the county fair, grew into a show string of breeding animals and a flock of sheep. At the most, I had 30 sheep, but we would take those sheep to various county fairs and shows throughout California, and we would compete with those against other people who had their own sheep and flocks. And it wasn't at the county fair, when it's your home fair and you have a market animal, you're competing against other kids, youth, who also have market animals, and you're trying to bring the best animal you can to the county fair and win the market class. But when you leave your home county fair, you're no longer competing against just kids. And when you're 13 years old and you're just getting your feet under you and you're starting to figure this stuff out, and you go to a show and you realize that the other people who are in the show ring with you are not kids. They're adults. They're older people. And it's an open class, so you're competing against other exhibitors that are not your age. They're sometimes very older. And so it is a lot to feel when you lose to those people, and it is a lot to feel when you win against those people. And it does build character. Losing builds character. Winning builds character and appreciation for the hard work that you put in. When you win or you do well, you know, you get to reap the rewards of that hard work that you put in. And for me, this is, 35 years ago now. I know we're dating ourselves, but this is the late 80s, mid 80s, late 80s that I was showing animals. And through the early 90s, you know, I graduated high school in the early 90s, and so I was showing all the way up and through them. And it was a lot of work to get a show string ready, and I had friends that would help me. They would help me show, they would help me groom, they would help me, you know, wash the sheep and get them ready for the show. There's a lot of work that went into it back then. There's a lot less work that goes into it now because they are fitted. You know, the sheep get fitted differently today than they did back when I was doing it, because we were doing a lot by hand. Now they do a lot with the electric shears and stuff like that. But there was a lot that I learned through that competitive process growing up in that environment that helped build me and shape me into the person I am today. It is why I work so hard and why I've told my kids that with my quad injury, I'm going to come back stronger. It is in my nature to be the best version of me that I can be. And that's, like I said, that started when I was a kid. I played soccer when I was, 7, 8 years old, but it was for fun. It wasn't necessarily a competition like that. But showing the animals with the show string, that was my competitive side. The other thing that I did when I was younger was that really brought the competition out was when we moved from the city, Sacramento, up the hill to rural area where we grew up. I was in 7th grade or so. And we moved up here, and that's when my parents decided that we could have dirt bikes. And so for my brothers and I, we all got dirt bikes. My youngest brother had his 80, and I think I told you about this in the story about the hunting trips when my mom used to go with us on the dirt bike rides, and my dad and all of us had our dirt bikes. But when we got our dirt bikes, there was this little competition between the three of us because it was the three boys. It was me, my younger brother, and then my youngest brother, and then my dad and my mom. But my two brothers and I would race, and we'd take the dirt bikes out to the tracks and we would race. And my youngest brother was probably the best of us all because he was fast and he was started younger than I did. When I got my first dirt bike, I was 14 and he was 11, I think, 10 or 11, somewhere around there. And then my middle brother was in between, but he was the most daring of us all. There is no fear in him when he was a kid, to the point that it actually cost him almost his life on a homecoming night in high school. But that's not necessarily the type of competition we're talking about. Of course, I was multiple boys and going out after girls and stuff like that. But anyways, we would compete with each other on the dirt bike track, but we would never race in the same class because I was older, so I was a little bit ahead of them. I would be on the 125 and they were on the 80s, and then they would move up, and then I moved up to 250, and my middle brother had a 125, my youngest brother had the 80. So we were kind of in different competition, different classes, but we'd always be competing against one another. Who could go faster and who could jump farther, jump bigger jumps. And I never won any of those. I mean, I tried, but I was never, a daredevil, daring enough to just let it rip over a jump or a tabletop or something like that, or pitch it sideways and get all out of shape in the air and be able to bring it back. I tried, and believe me, I did more than one endo trying, and that's the competitive nature of me. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes you go over the handlebars, and not always fun. I broke my arm doing that, racing dirt bikes at one time, but the competition that we had amongst us, I think it brought us closer. Ultimately, it was a common bond, and my two brothers still watch motocross and supercross, and they talk about it all the time. They're in a fantasy motocross league, but I am not in that fantasy motocross league. But the competition is still there. My brother and I went to a dirt bike race. Gosh, it's been probably 5, maybe right before COVID. We went to a dirt bike race and both ended up getting trophies that night, which is something that was a big deal. I mean, you're over 40, you're raising the over 40 class, and you can still end up on the podium. That's something to be proud of. And that is a testament to, still being able to be fast at that age, keeping yourself in decent shape that you can go fast without getting hurt and stuff like that. But we would race those dirt bikes together, the three of us would, and had a lot of fun doing it. The other thing that, the competition, the competitive side of me also enjoys is the fantasy sports. That's been something since I've been in high school, but the trash talk amongst the boys. I mean, my fantasy football team group, the 10 of us, are really a great group of guys. And I wouldn't trade any of them for the world. I'll tell you that right now. But I'll also tell you that how they interact with you depends on if you're beating them that day on the fantasy football scoreboard. Because it is very competitive. We have the loser of our fantasy football league. Every year we go golfing for our draft weekend, and we'll go somewhere for the draft, but we usually incorporate golfing into it. And the loser who is gets a trophy that is an outhouse toilet on a rock, and it's got some plaques underneath it with their names and a little saying and the year that they lost, which I've never been on there. And I won't be on there, believe me. There's no way that I'm going to be on the outhouse trophy. That's not going to happen. I won't let it happen. I will work too hard. I will outwork any other manager in the fantasy football realm to make sure that that doesn't happen. But the loser gets to go golfing with a tiara, princess crown, and a tutu on them all day long. They get to golf. And then during the draft, anytime somebody needs a drink or a snack, you just ask the loser. We call him the beer bitch. You are the beer bitch for the night. Fetch me a beer, fetch me a drink, give me a snack, whatever it might be. I mean, we try to make it fun, but at the same time, it's a punishment when you lose because it's a competition. And when you lose at competition, it's supposed to hurt a little bit. That's part of the character building process. But for me, that is just something that I won't allow to happen in the fantasy realm. Part of my favorite competitive stories, though, has got to be the rivalries that we see in professional sports. And living in Northern California, a lot of times the outlaws of our area was the Oakland Raiders. Anybody who went to an Oakland Raiders game in Oakland knew that going into Oakland Stadium with another team's colors on was dangerous. It was not something that you just willy-nilly do. And it is sure as heck not something that you do by yourself, because I don't care how big of a rivalry it is. If you're going to a Raiders game against the Kansas City Chiefs or the San Diego Chargers, and you go into Oakland Coliseum with the Raiders at home, and you walk in there with Chiefs gear on or Chargers gear on, there's probably a 50-50 chance that you don't come back alive. Now, that's part of the reason that Oakland left the Oakland area, and they're now the Las Vegas Raiders. But that home field advantage, when it came to that competition of the NFL that the Raiders had there with their fans and everything else, that was something that you couldn't mimic. You just don't see that at other stadiums. Maybe it's because the fans of other teams are a little more sophisticated than Raiders fans. Even today, I'm not sure they're the most sophisticated fans, but I will tell you their stadium in Las Vegas is absolutely off the hook. Gorgeous. Probably one of the most beautiful stadiums I've been in. It's not the biggest stadium that I've been in. SoFi was much bigger, but Las Vegas Stadium for the Raiders that they play in is a fantastic stadium. And it's really cool. It's very technologically hip with everything that they got going in on there. But the rivalries in the NFL are second to none. Growing up in my family with my dad being a 49ers fan, it was the Niners and the Rams. That was the big rivalry. All growing up, that's all that we would hear of. And I was a Colts fan, so I didn't really have a rivalry because the Colts sucked. They were terrible in the 80s and 90s, except for the one year that Pittsburgh beat them in that crappy AFC championship game that they cheated in. But, I like to think that the Steelers are a little bit of a rival to the Colts because they've been back and forth, and the Steelers have had our number, and we've got theirs a couple times. But really, the biggest Colts rival of the 90s and 2000s was the New England Patriots. Back this is going back to Tom Brady and Peyton Manning times, and Brady got the best of Manning when it came to the numbers. But that was a great rivalry. Every game that they played was usually a fairly competitive game. Um, there were some games that were in the snow in New England that were wild games. Of course, that's where Tom Brady and the Raiders played, and the Tuck rule was invoked. And they bailed Tom Brady out again because the NFL loves Tom Brady. But yeah, some of the rivalries and the competitive spirit of sports is, what shapes our everyday life to an extent. And I will tell you, being the competitive person that I am, my wife has me figured out, which God bless her for figuring it out. She watches that Colts score during the game day. And hey, if they're doing good, she knows the King's going to be in a good mood later. And that's usually a good sign for the Queen when the King is in a good mood. So as that score is going the Colts' way, she knows whether or not the mood of the King is going to be on the good side or the bad side. And lately, the last, 5 or 6 years, it's been a lot on the bad side because the Colts have not been good. But this year, they're off to a great start. Probably the best start that they've had in 15 years. So, here's crossing our fingers and hoping that they can keep it up. But those rivalries that you get out of the sports and baseball and all that other stuff, you just love them. And that's probably where we learn some of our greatest lessons is from competition and stuff like that. Because you learn how to lose with humility. You learn how to be humble when you win. A lot of times when I was doing what I was doing, if I would lose in the show ring, I was losing to my friends. If I would win in the show ring, I was beating my friends because it's a small community. And so you learn that just because you win doesn't mean you get to say, "Ha ha, in your face, man. I totally beat you. I kicked your butt on that one." You don't trash talk them all the time when you win. Now, when we do fantasy football, there's a little bit of that going on. But growing up in the general, the way that I was raised and more of the person that I am is I'm happy to trash talk with you, but I'm not going to be demeaning about it. Telling somebody that they're a terrible person or whatever is just not the way to trash talk. But you don't always rub it in their face either when you win, because the next time you might not be on that winning side, or you might not be on that losing side. And a lot of the competitive nature of sports and competition, which is obviously in a variety of different shapes, sizes, and forms, competition teaches you that treat others the way that you would want to be treated. That really holds true when it comes to competition, especially amongst friends and your peers. If you win and you treat somebody who you beat with dignity and respect, then the rule of the world should be, Murphy's Law should be that when you lose, you will also be treated with dignity and respect. And that holds true. And you don't learn that until you're in a competitive setting. And maybe the competition could even be the job interview, right? You're interviewing with other people for the same job and you don't get selected, or you do get selected for the job. You never know when those paths are going to cross again in the future. So you don't just say, "Ha ha, sucker, I got the job and you didn't. Whoop, whoop." No, you say, "Hey, sorry that you didn't get the job. Maybe one will come your way. Maybe you end up talking to the person, you make friends with them. You put a good word in for them down the line, or they get a job and you are looking to make a career move and you've stayed in touch, and they put a word in for whatever they're doing to get you into a different line of work than what you want to be doing there. It all, karma is a real thing. And the way that you treat people when you win or lose, or when you beat them or lose to them, matters. It comes back out. It'll come back to bite you if you're not careful. But, you can't win them all. And that's where the humility comes in. And that's where, you got to be gracious with yourself and understand that you can't win them all. You are going to have struggles. As you know, the King's Quad is a struggle right now. But getting better every day. Keep pushing and keep trying and trying and trying. And my competition is with myself and, Father Time at this point. But, you keep working at it. But you be humble, be understanding, be forgiving for when it doesn't go exactly the way that you want it to. And then you learn resilience, right? Losing doesn't kill you most of the time, unless you're doing extreme sports, in which case losing could kill you. So maybe be careful when you're doing that. It kind of goes back to that don't make dumb decisions, make good decisions. Jumping off cliffs with a parachute on your back that you're not positive is going to open when you pull it out. I mean, that's not a decision I would make. I don't know why you'd do that, but it's a thing. Base jumping is a thing, but, if it doesn't kill you, then that's going to be a hell of a story, isn't it? I jumped off a cliff and I base jumped off of a cliff that went, 1,500 vertical feet straight down, and you base jump that thing with a parachute. And that takes a level of courage and crazy that I don't have, and that's not going to happen. But, the court here, we thrive on rivalries. We thrive on competition, and it makes the wins sweeter, and it makes the losses funnier. I'm the first person to tell you that if you want to throw a cornhole bag, I'll throw cornhole with you, but I'm bad at it. I'm not good at cornhole. I tell everybody who wants to play cornhole with me, I'm not good at cornhole. But then I throw it in the board and it goes in the hole 3 times out of 4, and they make fun of me because I'm not good at cornhole. Of course, that's just part of the good story, right? So in the King's Court, you don't have to win to belong, but you do have to play. You have to play. You have to play to belong, because showing up is the point, right? And if you're bad at it, at least be entertaining, which I'm pretty good at being entertaining when I'm bad at stuff. That's why people hang out with me. They like to laugh at me, which I'm okay. If you want to laugh at me, just don't be mad when I laugh at you. If you do something stupid, I'm going to laugh at you. That is the rivalry, right? That is the competition. Who can be more stupid? Who can be more funny? I'll probably win at both, but you can try. So anyways, the next episode is going to be, I think the next episode is building the empire. So we'll get into maybe a little bit of business leadership and why concrete might be the most frustrating thing on earth, and how you got to work it and you got to massage it to get it to come out the way that you want it. And I'll probably figure out some way to tie it in with that empire building vibe. But for the end of this podcast and teasing the next episode, that one's going to have to work for now. So if you like it, if you like the podcast, you like the vibe, you like the feel, hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening to me, or if you're watching me on the YouTube station, subscribe to that. If you have feedback and you want to give it to me, I encourage you to send me an email, therealkingroberto@gmail.com, or reach out on Instagram or X and DM me there. It's the Real King Roberto on both of them. But yeah, send me your funniest rivalry or your best story from competition, and I'd be happy to read it on the court. I have not got any stories yet, but I'm hoping that somebody comes through and gives me something to read, because you know what? Trying to think of everything for this podcast is a bit intimidating sometimes. And I'm not a creative person, but I do the best I can with what I've got. So, again, if you like it, hit the subscribe button. And we will see you on the next podcast episode. And I look forward to hopefully hearing from you. King Roberto saying goodbye. Bye.